Very excited. We're joined by Clarke. Thanks a lot for joining us, Carly.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So let's, we're both doing the same stuff. Where did you get started with basketball and where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So I'm an East Coaster. I know some people out west think East Canada is like Ontario and Quebec, but there's another few provinces out here or past us. I'm in Toronto right now. So yeah, I grew up in Halifax, started playing basketball when I was 8 years old, I think, and just flourished and stayed involved in it since then.
So you started playing. How was your high school experience? What did that look like?
Yeah, so high school was an amazing experience for me. I was really fortunate to have an incredible coach. His name was Stephen Stewart. He built a great program at our high school. We won 2 provincial championships while I was there. They went on to win another one the year after I graduated. So surrounded by some great players, ones that went on to be all Canadians and in youth sports and went on to some Division I schools as well. So just really positive experience. I'm a big believer in the community and the friendships and the relationships that you get through sport and basketball in particular. And, you know, some of my best friends to this day were some of my high school teammates or provincial team teammates that I had, I guess, back in the day when I was in high school. So just a great experience and, you know, probably really created a deeper level of love for the game that just went on to university and beyond.
Yeah, for sure. So you won a couple championships in high school. Your team's very good, bunch of really good players. You end up going to play university. How'd you end up deciding on the university that you chose, and then what was that experience like?
Great question. Well, I think it's kind of a fun story because for people that don't know, the youth sports men's basketball championships were held in Halifax for like 20 years straight. So every March, I would be at our venue. It's called the Metro Center. Was called the Metro Center. I would be there watching the Final 8 championships every year for as long as I can remember. And I remember in grade 9, it was 1998. You know, you always get attached to the teams that were there. And Bishops was a team that was there in 1997 and then again in 1998. And there was always these student sections for all the teams, or, you know, their fan sections where they're a bit rowdy. And Bishop's section was like 10 times the size of every other school. So, you know, Bishop's was this small school that I hadn't really heard of, but saw them win a national championship in Halifax in 1998. And I think if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't really know what Bishop's was or what Bishop's was about. So that was kind of my first introduction. And then playing through high school, you know, growing up in the Maritimes, there's lots of universities there. There's lots of smaller schools throughout the Maritimes. And I wanted to get out of the province, out of the region, just because a lot of people that I went to high school with or played against would be in those locations. So I wanted a different experience. And Bishops had a small school feel. I was recruited by 5 or 6 different schools consistently, but visited there and had a great experience, met some of my best friends to this day on that visit. And, you know, just got a great vibe from the team, from the coach, and from the university, and ended up picking Bishops as my choice for university.
Very cool. I mean, you know, I always talk to university coaches about having high school kids around their university and around their teams and what an impact it might have in future years, and you don't even know it. I'm going to jump forward and then we're going to come right back to university experience. One of the things I keep seeing on social media is you got a lot of teams playing at Ryerson, even to this day. You have different leagues and stuff happening. Talk about what it's like having kids actually have the opportunity to play on your campus, in your gyms, getting ready for whatever it is that they're doing, but knowing in the back of their head that, hey, I wouldn't mind maybe coming to school here one day.
Yeah, that's been, you know, something that's been certainly tremendous for our program and our university. Ryerson historically is not one of the more well-known universities in Canada. But over the last decade to 15 years, the education has progressed tremendously. They've always been very strong in certain programs, but the program offerings have widened incredibly, and they're very career focused and experiential learning focused. So it's a very unique learning environment, but people are sometimes intimidated by it being in downtown Toronto. So what I always say is, obviously I'm biased as the coach there, but when people get on campus, they see what Ryerson is about. They see the campus and student experience, and the other part of that is our facilities are incredible. So getting athletes there to play on our court. Our venue is the former Maple Leaf Gardens, where the first ever NBA game was played in our venue. I mean, pre-renovation, and the Leafs used to play, the Raptors have played. We're just really, really lucky to have the facility that has the capability to host a variety of events and showcase the importance that Ryerson places on athletics. And hopefully the players come into our building and feel that experience and just how nice of a facility it is. So it's certainly great to have all the events at every level.
Yeah, I mean, you're creating the environment that you had with that team that came to your town, right? So very, very cool. So you end up at Bishop's. Talk about that experience there. Obviously, Robin from our office, she glows about when she talks about Bishop's and kind of the cult. I'm gonna call it a local. It's like a mini cult over there, where everybody's kind of stuck together. So you might differ, I don't know, but what are your thoughts on the university experience that you had there?
Yeah, no, Bishop's is a special place. It is it's a small school in a small town. So you get to know everybody, like from your classmates, obviously your teammates, your professors, the townies. You get familiar with everybody, and there's just a passion of Bishop's alumni that resonates. You feel it when you're there as a student, and then it continues on when you graduate. And I think that's one of the things they excel at, is they keep you connected. But for me as a student, athletics were well supported, so I always felt valued as a member of the women's basketball team. So not just men's football and men's basketball were at the forefront. Women's basketball was important too. So that was really unique, and just a very family-like environment. Our team was very close-knit. Again, you get to know a lot of people around the campus and town, so you always felt welcome there, and really proud to wear the purple and to represent Bishop's when we were playing there. And again, some of my best friends to this day are people that I went there with and was teammates with.
I try to explain to kids that's kind of how it works. Like when you find the right spot, it's kind of something that sticks with you forever. So that's kind of cool to hear that happened for you. So you go there, it's a good experience. How does coaching come into it? When did you think coaching was for you, and when did you decide that you were going to go into it, and then how'd you get started?
Yeah, great question. People that have been around me probably tell this story a little bit differently, and by around me I mean growing up. But I feel like I never knew I was going to be a coach, but I've always had an intrigue with the game. I've always been a curious learner in everything. So the things that I'm doing, I'm really interested in learning about and getting better at, and basketball was always one of those things. I started doing some coaching in the summers when I was still a player at Bishop. So I started to get my feet wet with it, and really, interest peaked, and I just kept going with those experiences. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do when I graduated from Bishop's. I knew I loved basketball and was going to stay a part of basketball, but I didn't necessarily think it was going to be a career. And then a coach that I had when I was younger, she was the Canada Games coach in 2001. I played for her. She called me. She was the head coach at Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia, and asked me to come join her staff as an assistant coach. So wasn't sure what I was going to do. Got the call from her. It was in my hometown, and I was thinking about doing an MBA, so a master's in business admin, and it all aligned for me to go do my MBA at Dal and start assistant coaching with her for a couple of years. So that's where I got another degree, got a master's, and then really got into coaching, was given a lot of opportunity there. And, the opportunities just continued from there. Did some head coaching with provincial teams, got into the national team programming. And after another year with the national team program after Dal, I was hired at 26 to be a head coach at the University of Prince Edward Island, and 3 years there, and then on to Ryerson. So just trying to make the most of every opportunity that was put in front of me and learn along the way.
I mean, meteoric rise, very cool. It's been, Robin, we've never met before, but Robin's been telling me about you for about 9 years now. So I know more about you than I should. But, she also said that too, that you were a coach from the beginning, even when you were a player. So that's something that I think maybe you didn't recognize it, but I think maybe people saw it in you. So that's kind of cool to hear that. So you end up getting the job at Ryerson. Your teams have been very, very good. Talk about what it was like putting your stamp on the program when you got there, and the kind of the core beliefs that you guys have on your team.
Yeah, well, I think, one of the things that have allowed our program at Ryerson to become successful is the experience I had at UPEI. So I was there for 3 seasons, and we were in a complete rebuild. So the team had won 2 games the year before. We spent 2 years not winning a regular season game, and that experience was really, really challenging, right? Like, I'm a competitor too, excuse me, and I just really wanted to win. So, with that in mind, I had to figure out how to find successes along the way. Like, when you're not winning games, you got to figure out, ways to tell yourself and tell your players that you're making progress. So, that process focus that I developed before I was hired at Ryerson, I think was really, really important. So we brought a lot of those things into the program, and really valued focusing on being the best at getting better. And that's something we talk about every day. So we certainly have teams that we want to beat, but we want to be better than the team we were yesterday. And if we can keep being a little bit better than we were the day before and focus on that process through the ways we want to do it with our system, we felt like we would be in a position to succeed. So we really tried to keep measuring ourselves versus ourselves. And obviously you have games against other teams that help measure that as well. But I think that was a founding belief, and just understanding the behaviors, the characteristics, the attitude that you have to have before you win, what those things look like, and how to live them every day. Because if you can develop all those things, then I think you're on the path to winning. And even if you don't win it all, which we haven't quite done yet, we've won the conference, but not a national championship, we know that we've pretty much done everything we could, and try and leave that scenario with no regrets, I guess, because we put our entire selves out there.
It's funny, you sound like Nick Saban, to be honest with you. You talk about process, got to take care of the details, and the details eventually take care of everything else. Very true. Couldn't agree with you more. On this specific team, what like this past season, you had some injuries, you had to overcome them. Talk about the resiliency of your team to deal with all the injuries that you had to deal with, and then find a way to still get to national and have from where I'm standing, a tremendously successful season.
Yeah, this season really was a special one. I think, if we look at our last 3 games, it ended in some disappointment because we didn't achieve, the goal we had set out to achieve. But, certainly our best 2-way player tore ACL 2 weeks into January. And, I think we had a couple really hard days, one because we really felt for that player. To see her go down and have a season-ending injury like that. But then you feel for the seniors who really felt we had a chance to win it all. So we had to spend some time, like we spent a couple days, feeling bad. And I think that part is okay. But, then we got solution focused and recognized, one of the things we valued about our team was our depth. So, we just talked about next person up, and how we could shift what we were doing a little bit and still be as good, and ask a little bit more from the people that were kind of waiting in line. And, from the beginning of the year, we were taking the approach, certainly from a fitness and a preparation perspective, that every player needs to be able to play 40 minutes. And, you might play 0 minutes, but if you're prepared to play 40, then when this type of opportunity arises, you are ready. So it was great to see that type of thing pay off. The way that we rebounded, we were really fortunate to have some tremendous leadership in our veteran point guard in particular, and that resonated through other people. And again, just focusing on what we felt we could control, trying to continue to be the best at getting better in our areas. And different players gained some confidence, stepped up, and we were able to create some momentum, I think, out of that as well, of, people maybe thinking that we were done after the injury, and we found some belief in ourselves.
Resiliency is always the key to everything. Now, talking to you for this brief amount of time, I'm seeing a combination of like an Army general / a business leader / a basketball coach. So it's kind of like you've got the whole three. So let's go back to the MBA real quick. What got you to do an MBA, and how do you think that specifically has translated to you as a basketball coach?
Yeah. Well, I think not knowing what I wanted to do was a factor in it, but I did my undergrad in biology actually, but I also ended up doing a minor in business during my 5 years at Bishop's. And that minor piqued my interest in a lot of areas. I specifically remember a couple of classes in interpersonal skills and human resources specifically. And, I'm passionate about that part of basketball in coaching. I've already said, like, the relationships, but the team building and the connection, and how that side of things with the culture can really help drive your performance as a team. So it's, almost like a multiplier on top of the talented individual players you have, if you can connect them and bring them together. So I think that really drove the interest. And then the other side of it was, I think my dad really supported me doing an MBA with, I say that as a bit of a joke, but, if I'm getting into coaching, go do your master's too, so you're well prepared if this thing doesn't work out. But secretly, like, when you're coaching a basketball program, you're managing people, you're building a team, at the U Sports level, you're also, and I think every level, you're in charge of a budget. You're managing a variety of different resources, you're planning. So there is a tremendous amount of skills that I've taken from that experience and applied to building a basketball program, for sure. You're essentially a general manager, right? Or a CEO in a lot of capacities.
100%. Well, if you're good at it, you are, for sure. And so clearly it's working out for you. Now you have, I think also the mindset change in the team mentality, from playing on the team and maybe from doing high level business stuff is kind of translated to your teams. Talk about where you kind of formulated your coaching beliefs, and who's had the biggest impact on you as a coach.
Well, one of the things that really resonates with me is I'm a fairly introverted by nature person. And growing up, I was very shy, timid, lacked some confidence in a lot of areas, throughout high school and even university. But on the basketball court, I always felt this different level of comfort and confidence. And I'm very aware of these skills that I was able to develop, both individually and creating, I guess, amongst a team. So I think that's a big driver of my philosophy. I'm a big believer in building those life skills and life lessons through the sport. I think competitiveness is also a piece of that, and especially in young women, to drive to put yourself out there, try something new, succeed, maybe fail first too, and still keep trying. Those are all things I lived through. Like, I vividly remember being cut from teams that I wanted to make so badly, and the devastation that came from that, and, wanting to quit for a couple days and just being discouraged, but, building the skill to fight through that. I think, women in basketball aren't going on to make millions and millions of dollars very frequently. There are certainly some players that are going to do that, but basketball is a means to develop a lot of these skills and abilities to go make an impact in basketball, maybe as a coach or another field or something else. So I think, I'm just a big believer in those types of things and building a philosophy and running a basketball program, especially at the university level. And for those that impacted me, I think my parents have always supported me, which, I'm very, very grateful for. They're number one fans to this day. My mom still checks every box score before I do, which is hilarious. But, I've also been really lucky. I was surrounded by female coaches growing up, so it was just normal for a woman to go on and be a coach. And then just empowered by my high school coach, university coach, and so on. And you mentioned Nick Saban. I do an incredible amount of reading and watching and listening to a number of coaches in every sport, just to keep learning and being better.
No, and I mean, it shows for sure. Now let me ask you this question. If you could go back in time and give young Carly, not that you're not young Carly now, but younger Carly, a little bit of advice, something that, maybe she needed to hear at the time, what would you do?
Good question. I think, some of the skills that I talked about, I didn't necessarily live right away. So I do now I had this poster since I was a kid, but the Michael Jordan poster of I've missed 10,000 shots, and that is why, I failed and failed and failed, and that is why I succeed. I think there still is moments, there were too many moments where I was too tentative to really put myself out there and try. So I would, I'm probably the biggest believer in that type of message, and would tell myself that, don't be afraid to fail, go out, put yourself out there. And then I think the other kind of leaning on that is exude confidence, in the areas that you do feel confident about. I think, I still have moments to this day, so I'm probably telling myself this advice continually to, trust your abilities. And I think that's pretty common in young women to be, a little tentative, but it's okay to exude confidence and demonstrate your ability when you have it.
Well, and it's a young person thing, right? I think everybody kind of suffers from questioning themselves and thinking whether they're capable or not. And but with somebody like yourself, when you put in the work has to give you that confidence, and you need to then you need to believe in the work you put in, right? And that's one of the things I try to tell kids all the time when they're playing, dude, you put in the work, you spent the time, you've tested it at the highest level. It's time to show off. Let's go. You got to show it off. And so it's kind of interesting to hear you say, the same thing and kind of exude that confidence, because that is definitely something that's missing from, a lot of young kids, but especially young females, on the basketball court, and then in life, it translates to other parts of their life as well. So it's important to hear that for sure. Now let's change this to another one. What would be one big obstacle or opportunity that you've had to overcome to get to the place that you are today?
Well, I do feel very, very fortunate that I've been presented a lot of opportunities. I'm quite proud of how I believe I've made most of every opportunity that's been presented. But, I talked about the experience at UPEI and just, enduring 3 losing seasons. That's probably not a massive obstacle in some ways, but, for me to figure out my mindset as a huge competitor, I want to win in everything. How to endure that process and continue to believe in what I was doing, and not lose the confidence through those moments. That would be, that would certainly be a big one. And, kind of related to the confidence thing too, it's just, I remember first World Championships, I was coaching the U17 national team. It was 2012. We had an incredible team. We ended up winning a bronze medal in the World Championships, the first ever age group medal for Canada. And I remember we were playing Belgium in a pool game, and their coach came over to shake hands, and I was in the first seat, and he walked past me and he walked to the male assistant who was sitting next to me. So I tell that story because, part of, something to continually overcome and be aware of and drive for is women in coaching. And, again, it comes, like I said, comes back to the confidence and belief to, to pursue this career in, a relatively male dominated field. Now there's tremendous men and women supporting me and many others through this, but certainly that's an area that became aware of quickly when I was getting into it.
How old were you when you were coaching that team?
Oh, you're getting me to do some math. I think it was 29.
I was gonna say, I mean, geez, that's pretty cool, man. Like people in their 60s are like waiting for their opportunity to get that at 29 and then to deliver with a bronze medal for the first time ever. That's got to be a pretty cool experience. Give us a little bit of a tidbit on what that was like. Did you go in there expecting that you guys were going to do something like that, or were you like, let's see how we can do, and we got a shot?
Yeah, that summer, I don't know what our expectations were, to be honest. I think we believed we could win a medal, but this was only the second World Championship at that age group, and the Canadian team 2 years prior, I think, finished 9th. They just had a tough go. They, just didn't work out as well as they had hoped. So we really just tried to take it one game at a time. I remember we lost our first game of that tournament. It was against Italy. And, it was just very, I was very green in that situation and had some veteran assistance, but, we just didn't really know what to expect of many of our opponents. So I remember we had a very powerful team meeting after that Italy game, and our team just came together at another level. And, we came out of pool play in a great position and squeaked out a 1-point win over the host, the Netherlands, and ended up with a great comeback win against Japan in the bronze medal. So the experience was great. The national team experience overall is just an incredible space for learning and developing. So I'm very grateful for that.
That's awesome. Let's circle back to high school kids. So one of the things I was just talking with Scott about actually in our interview that we were talking about is we're not sold that kids are asking the right questions. I have an interview with a kid in a couple hours to talk about their university, and we were texting last night, and I'm just like, you're not asking the right questions here. Like, you got to ask, what type of situation am I getting into? Like, what are you, as a person, you got to ask yourself, am I okay with losing? Is it okay with losing? Am I okay, or do I need to be on a winning team? Am I okay with sitting on the bench if I go on a winning? Like, these are the questions that I think are very important. Like, if you're going to a top level team as a freshman, there's like not very many of those playing. So you have to kind of get the mindset that you need to earn it, but then also on top of it, if your team's any good, you're probably not good enough as a freshman anyway. So what are some of the questions that you think maybe kids aren't asking enough, or when they do ask, you're like, that's a great question?
Yeah, I think you just rattled off a bunch of the really, really important ones. But, overall, I would say it's really important for the student athlete to reflect on what they want in their experience. And I think everyone is different in that. And I know, like, from recruiting on the other side, I've lived that because I'm trying to figure out what's important to them. So to your point, like, is playing time important or is winning important? Are both of those things important? I think to be able to truly reflect yourself on what the things are that really matter. Like, is your uniform color important? Is close to home, far from home?
It sounds silly, but for some people, that's actually important.
It's really nice team room, nice gym, right? Like, academic program, is that a critical piece? The education that you're going to come back with. I think having a true sense, because players that are going through recruiting are going to be told different things, right? But I think the student athletes and their families need to really know what's actually important to them. And I think to that point, you can also do some research to discover if what the coach is telling you is true. So, there are some first years, to your point, that can go to great programs and play. But you can look back, if a coach has been there, like if you look back at our Ryerson team over the last 8 years, we've been pretty good. But our first year players, some of them still come in and like start, as an example. But there's some programs that just might have the philosophy is like, your first year, you're not playing. Like, so I think you can do some research and not just always rely on what the coach is saying to get some of those answers. But, I think, to your point, just figuring out what actually matters to you. Sometimes winning may not matter to every player, right? But playing time really does. And that's okay if that fits with you. But, other outside influences might be saying, well, they're not a great team, but maybe you have an opportunity to rebuild it. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but
this is important. I asked for a reason. This is great. Keep going.
Yeah. So I think like being true to yourself about what the things are that really matter. And it truly can be anything: city school, country school, flight away from home. You want to be part of a close-knit culture team. Like that might not matter to you. You might be, do you want to be the leading scorer? And then looking at, how do you fit within the roster? So, well, there's 3 players at my position that are second year and I'm going to be first year next year. So if I want to play, am I really going to play? And that comes back to your own sense of confidence and knowing how good you are and
being
truly
realistic. Also, you got to be realistic. If those kids can actually play, it doesn't really matter how good you are because there's only so much room.
Exactly. So I think that happens where, some players might tell themselves like, oh yeah, I'll be fine not playing. Like I'm okay being on the bench. And then you go and live it. And you're like, wait a minute, and some players need to live it to figure it out. And again, still rambling a little bit. I think it's okay to endure some of those challenging moments too, right? And maybe not play and then have to work for it. So that's maybe another question you can ask yourself is, are you willing to do the work to earn the opportunity, or do you just want it? Yeah.
Because, well, at the end of the day, the thing I like about basketball is it's an honest game. And then what I mean by that is you either are good enough or you're not good enough. And if you are good enough, eventually it'll work out. And if you're not good enough, eventually that's going to work out too. And you either got to put in the time or, and then it's not fair, right? Like life's not fair, but some people are just better than you. And so you maybe you got to work 3 times harder than they do. And maybe you've had that in your coaching career, or maybe, you've seen that with other things, but realistically, you just you gotta have that work ethic. You gotta have the understanding of what you're actually trying to achieve. So you got a team next year. Talk a little bit about your Ryerson team next year, because I'm pretty sure you guys are going to be very good. So what type of players you guys got? What type of incoming recruiting class? What are we looking like?
Yeah, we've had a really strong recruiting year. We've added stretch forward, so a 6'2" player that can shoot a 3, a long dynamic athlete that can guard every position. And then we've added 4 guards. So a couple can really shoot it. 2 others are point guards and competitors. And, one of the characteristics that we're most excited about with our incoming players is their work ethic. So you've already mentioned it a bunch of times, but when players understand how hard you have to work and don't need a coach nagging you to work all the time, the more you can coach the things that really matter. So not that hard working doesn't matter, but as a coach, if I don't have to give you feedback about how hard you're working, and I can give you feedback on the basketball side of things, what a difference. So I think we've got some great natural workers. I think, that's something we've begun to pride ourselves on as a program, is our team is driven to get better, and players that want to be surrounded by good players come to our program. So, because they know they're going to be challenged to be better every single day. They're not just, hopefully that leads to winning games, but themselves are going to be pushed because they're going to be playing against great players and training with great players every day with a similar mindset. So we're excited about our team. We've got a style where we play up tempo. Our transition offense was first in the country last year. That's something we want to maintain. We teach our players to make great decisions, to move and share the ball. We believe in unselfish play. We're a pretty great three-point shooting team, but we still get the ball inside and have some forwards. I think that's an important piece. And defensively, we strive to be like tough and relentless. We want to apply pressure, use our athleticism, and yeah, so we're pretty excited about our roster. We've got really strong returning core, and we've added some great pieces incoming. So, hopefully everything meshes well and COVID passes.
Yeah, no kidding. At some point, we got to move on. So, listening to you talk, you gave me two more questions I got to ask now.
Right.
Fast break, number one in the country. Talk about what it's like putting that together, and what are kind of like the core principles you got to bring on day one to make that happen.
The first thing is getting stops. So we spent a lot of time on our team defense and did a great job with defensive rebounding and creating some turnovers last year. So both of those things created good opportunities in transition. And then we spent a lot of time on transition drills in practice. So I've mentioned my level of compete a lot as we've chatted here. We can create a really competitive environment in practice. So we spend a lot of time on transition drills up and down, but we're playing against each other. It might be, advantage drills, 3-on-2, 2-on-1, 4-on-3, like those types of things. We're doing 2 or 3 of those every single day. And then just emphasizing the shots that we want and the decision making with that. So can we get to the rim? Can we create an open 3 for one of our, we had 2 players that shot 50% from a spot up 3 this season. So like knowing who your teammates are, being able to share and move the ball. We spend a lot of time on that. We'll play with a short shot clock in practice. And we're willing to live through some of the chaos with it. So like, early in the season in particular, like it's turnover central as they're trying to speed up and play, but just a lot of freedom. These are our concepts. If we can play fast first, we want to do that.
Very cool. I mean, I love it. We play a similar way with our club and our high school team. So I think a lot of people are trying to slow everything down, and I think we got to pick it up and have a little more fun, right? It's more enjoyable. We got to score. Let's get some buckets here. Last question. We do have some coaches listening. So I want to get your opinion on what it's like putting together a coaching staff at Ryerson, who you have currently, and then what kind of makes them special and part of your what you're trying to do.
Great question. We this is a brag probably, but I think we have the best coaching staff in the country.
It's not a brag if it's true.
Yeah.
So. Keep going.
We also have probably the largest coaching staff in the country, so that helps too. But I have been incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by some incredible people. So I'll run through what we've got. Our full-time assistant, so we're lucky to have a full-time assistant position. She was actually just hired to be a new head coach at the University of Waterloo. So that role is actually vacant. We're working on filling that, but that's been a special role for us, young female that can connect with the athletes, build relationships, spend a lot of time on film and player development. So that's a critical piece of our program. And obviously I work closely with that person day to day because they're full time. We've got another assistant coach that works in student ed, but at a different university. So is just aware of, what's going on with university students, and it's an important age where there's lots of different things that are happening. And he helps with scout, player development, anything we need. We've got 2 student assistants that have been students at our university. One's a former player with us, and one's a player at a men's program, or former player from a men's program. And he in particular is just a workhorse on film and helping ever we can. So we're really trying to develop young coaches too. And then after that, I've just kind of saved these 3 for last, and not because they're any more important, but they're a little bit unique. So we've got another guy, his name is Sherwin Ben. He's been with me for my 8 years at Ryerson, and he played, he coached, he's a phys ed, athletic director in high school, and he's a little bit older with great diversity and experience. And he's kind of like has my ear and, is that calming influence in games and provides great perspective, if that makes sense. And then the other two people we have are essentially high performance coaches. So one of them, his job, based on his schedule, he can't be on court with us very much, but he meets with our players one-on-one. And it's a bit of a sports psych element, but more of like a goal setting and development. So this is your role with the team. These are the things you need to get better at. This is how we're going to do it. And basically holds them accountable to that process. And the other person is actually an athletic therapist with our national team. And she's part-time with our team, not an athletic therapy role, but basically in a high performance standard and culture role. So when she's at practice 1 or 2 times a week, her feedback is on our core values and our standards. So she's providing feedback on communication, feedback, how are we managing mistakes? How are we responding? So, you talked about that resiliency factor earlier, like her role is that, and she builds our warm-ups to incorporate a lot of those elements. So, like I said, a large staff, but really special group of people and lots of areas covered. So our athletes develop like fully in every facet of what they're doing.
Massive. That's huge. I think a lot of people shy away from a big coaching staff, but I've always found that it's better if you get the right people. If everybody's on the same train, you can achieve so much more. And it's funny because, we're kind of scared of American comparisons in Canada, I find. But if you look, like, they have these budgets and they have all this money, and there's a reason they got 15 people on the bench. Like, it's not because they did all this research and found out it wasn't the right answer. It's because they know that when push comes to shove, you need all hands on deck. And so kind of cool to hear you kind of take a, more of American high performance, high level university approach to that. So that's kind of cool to see.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously a lot of our staff in differentiating are volunteers, so they're not there every single day. So, that does create some unique environments, but I've found over the years as we've gotten better at bringing back the MBA and some of those things, the ability to manage people, clearly define their roles. Our players know when they're going to be there and what their job is when they're there, creates an understanding and yeah, it's just started to work really, really well over the last 5 years. And I think we're seeing a difference from it for sure.
Very cool. Well, Carly, thank you so much for joining us. It's been fantastic to have you, especially having a good, positive role model at such a young age for women in sport. I'm very excited to have this on film, and we'll be able to share with a lot of people, and hopefully we can get a couple more kids excited to maybe follow in your footsteps. But I mean, I think already having a coaching tree where people are coaching in university when you're not even that old. That's pretty. As somebody who used to be the young buck, I'm excited to hear that, because that's very cool to see. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the court sometime soon.
Thanks so much for having me, and hope to get out there and see you all in person once this all passes too.